Welcome back, SethBling here, and today I want to share with you a very weird and pretty interesting speedrun that I did yesterday. This speedrun is sort of for the 11 exit category of Super Mario World, but as you'll see pretty soon, it deviates pretty far from what most people think of when they think of the 11 exit category. To be clear, the 11 exit category is the category where you beat a bunch of levels, go through Star World, get to Bowser's Castle, and kill Bowser and save the princess. Which is kind of the fastest way of beating the game without really glitching it all to hell. So this will do that, but it is definitely going to glitch the game out pretty hard. Before I go too far, I want to say a big thank you to Mr. Cheese, who was extremely instrumental in coming up with this route. And also Dots Are Cool and Mostly SMW, who helped a bit with the route as well. And I'll also say that the time that I got in this run is technically, I guess, could be considered a world record for 11 exit, but pretty much what's going to happen is the Super Mario World speedrun community is going to redefine what 11 exit means so that the shenanigans that I pull in this speedrun are not allowed. So I've done a bunch of stuff here that you've seen so far. I spent about a minute just kind of setting up shells and stuff like this. This is for an arbitrary code execution glitch. And this is a lot like the credits warp, but in this case, I get power-up state 22. Instead of warping to credits, instead of setting the game mode to the credits, I have changed Mario's power-up state to an invalid power-up state 22, which you may actually recognize from the Flappy Bird code injection that I did a while back. Notice in the hand camera I'm adjusting a clip on an extra controller. There's actually 3 extra controllers in addition to the main controller plugged in, and all of them have clipped down buttons using binder clips and some spring clamps. But this extra controller I actually have to adjust several times during the speedrun. So, like I said, I gave myself this power-up state 22, and the purpose of that is to basically allow me to do a different kind of arbitrary code execution that will be a lot faster, and I'll be able to basically run several iterations of the arbitrary code execution much more quickly. For those of you unfamiliar with an arbitrary code execution, basically I'm spitting out these Koopa shells at very specific pixel-perfect x coordinates, such that when they're arranged in memory, as they are, they'll look like a bunch of processor instructions to the Super Nintendo, and then I'll execute a glitch which forces the processor to start executing those instructions. And so, as you saw already, one set of instructions that I did caused the game to change Mario's power-up state. What I'm setting up now is a bit more intricate. I'm setting up some instructions that'll write a value to a place in memory. And but it doesn't just do that. It actually, if you run this code more than one time, it'll write values to successive locations in memory. So one location, then the next location, then the next location. And the location will be determined by the x-coordinate of the cloud, which you'll actually see in a moment, will pop out of my item box. So right here, I pop the cloud out. And so this cloud is actually going to be really important because I'm basically going to move the cloud to an x-coordinate and then collect a mushroom. And collecting a mushroom when you're in this invalid power-up state is what causes the game to start running the code that I set up with the Koopa shells. And so that code will load the x-coordinate of the cloud and then write it to a place in memory. Okay, so where am I writing all of this data? And by the way, I'm going to write 7 bytes of data into memory, into adjacent contiguous locations in memory. So where am I writing it to? Well, it turns out that most of the game's code is run from ROM, which stands for read-only memory. It's all stored on the game cartridge. So most of the game's code is stored on the game's cartridge, but when you turn on the console, Super Mario World actually writes a bit of code into RAM, and that's because it can basically use up a bunch of RAM to basically make a loop run faster. And so this loop has a lot of stuff that it needs to do. And it gets run a lot. It gets run almost every frame, or yeah, pretty much every frame. And it deals with some of the graphics objects on screen. And so there is some code that is in RAM. And so if I modify the code, it'll get run every frame. And this is sort of one of the things that we use in the Flappy Bird code injection. I almost lost the cloud there. That was pretty funny. But yeah, so you can see I'm just moving the cloud to a coordinate and then collecting the mushroom. I have to be holding A while I'm collecting the mushroom, and I am in all of these cases. Anyway, so I'm writing 7 bytes of my own code into this portion of memory that normally kind of writes values that have to do with graphics. And so the code that I'm writing is basically code that will read one of the extra controllers that I've plugged in that you see on the table. And so it'll read that controller and use that to decide upon a memory address to write to. And then it'll write the value 4 to that memory address. So when you have different buttons pressed on that controller, it'll write to different memory addresses. And it turns out that some of those memory addresses that we're able to access with this glitch are very close to each other, and they do things that are very nice for this type of speedrun. So, like I said at the beginning, this is an 11 exit speedrun, which means we need to complete 11 exits, basically all of Yoshi's Island, and then some donut plains, go to Star World, complete 4 levels in Star World, and then go to Bowser's Castle. And in this case, we're going to do all those things, but we're going to complete it in a bit of a different way. So you can see the graphics have already started to glitch out because we're writing to that glitchy part of memory. And then when I press select and Y on the controller, it's going to write to a timer, a countdown timer, that also gets written to whenever you collect a gold tape that says how long until the end of the sort of end of level walk. And so since it's only 4, it's going to be 4 frames. It's writing 4 to that location. So it just waits 4 frames, and then Mario does his little peace sign and walks off, having completed the level. And so the rest of the speedrun is pretty quick. It's me going through each of the levels. If I press just right on the controller, I can get the keyhole to appear. And so for the first few levels, I press select and Y in order to beat the level normally, and for a few levels, for the rest of the levels up until Bowser's Castle, I just press right in order to beat those levels very quickly. That one's actually pretty funny, the ghost house. You don't even have to enter the ghost house to get the keyhole trigger using this method. So, very silly method of beating the levels very fast. When I get to Bowser's Castle, I can't just beat it normally. I can't just press select and Y, because if you beat Bowser's Castle the same, like by collecting a gold tape or something like that, basically it just won't trigger the credits. You have to be in the Bowser room, and you have to put Bowser into a state where he'll drop Princess Peach. And so luckily that's also something that we can do once we're in the Bowser room with a different key combination. And so I have to actually run through Bowser's Castle and go through a couple of the doors, and that takes 45 seconds or something like that. But once I get to the room that Bowser's in, if I hold down YB, select start, and left, then the game will write 4 to the memory location that is responsible for tracking which phase of Bowser you're on. And it just so happens that 4 is the start of the sort of trigger that causes Bowser to drop, basically look like he's hurt and then drop Princess Peach, which triggers the credits. So here I have one more room to get to before I get to Bowser, and then you'll see in the controller camera, I rush to try and press all the buttons because it's 5 button presses all at once, which is a little bit difficult. But yeah, and then so it's a very quick Bowser fight. I don't even know if you want to call it a fight, but then you can see the top of Bowser's head as he's turned upside down, and Princess Peach floats down, and the speedrun is over. So the moment that Princess Peach appears, the speedrun is over, and so I got a time of 9 minutes and 39 seconds. I kind of reset my clock on accident, so it's not showing on screen, but that's what it was. So a really interesting speedrun and a really interesting use of glitches. Again, I want to thank Mr. Cheese. He had the brilliant idea that allowed us to use the controller to write to a bunch of different memory addresses, which would let us both get normal exits and secret exits, and also to manipulate Bowser's phases. So like I said, technically this might kind of count as an 11 exit speedrun, but it really doesn't invalidate the hard work that the people who run 11 exit, I run 11 exit sometimes too, have put into their speedruns, and this will almost certainly be put into a separate category once we kind of, as a community, figure out how we're going to categorize the different speedruns. So I kind of called it a world record in my live stream, but it kind of isn't really. But nonetheless, a very interesting glitch, and it definitely, there's some more interesting stuff we can do with this type of miniature code injection. Again, only 7 bytes were written into that place in RAM where that graphics routine sits. So, but yeah, if you want to see my route notes, they're in the video description, and some other links there as well. That's about it. Thanks for watching.